Okay, so I'll give talk about Dattatreya tradition and Datta. I was originally put down just to talk about Datta tradition, so first I'll kind of get off the ground what's Datta and what's tradition in this case, like what's Datta as spiritual being and what's tradition in the sense of spirituality. So my favorite way of describing Datta is this one set of lines from Datta Kavacham, which is, I sometimes chant this here, it's really powerful. And it's, the way they describe Datta in this, in one shloka is Tyagi Bogi Mahayogi Nityanando Niranjanaha Sarvarupi Sarvadatta Sarvaga Sarvakamadha. So for me this is Datta. So what is it? Tyagi comes from Tyaga, so it means to sacrifice. So first of all, Datta is a sacrificer. What does he sacrifice? He sacrifices everything that appears to exist, all appearances, time, temporary appearances, conditions. He sacrifices that into himself, which is the ultimate reality. And when all of that is sacrificed, then only Datta exists. In spirituality, there's sacrifice in two directions. The first direction is the sacrifice into illusion or ignorance, basically. That is reality as it knows itself, which is I am. I am the only thing that exists. I am the supreme reality. There is nothing else but me. It sacrifices that nature in order to have the experience of being separate, of the experience of being countless universes, countless beings, countless elements. So reality, consciousness, gives up, sacrifices its knowing of itself as totally whole in order to experience reality in a differentiated way. So great masters tell us, I mean they all say this, Datta says this in Avadhuta Gita, his main offering, that we are already that consciousness, just in a mode of, okay, let me experience being limited for a while. But right from the very beginning, that's what we are. So it's not like for enlightenment or liberation, that's something extra that needs to be created. It's only something that needs to be rediscovered. So the first sacrifices, reality sacrifices its own state, its own knowing, in order to experience itself in a differentiated way. And then the other way, and then finally, when it goes backwards, when reality says, okay, I'm fed up of this now, I'm fed up of this game, I'm fed up of believing that permanent fulfillment can come about through chasing temporary things. When reality, through us, through being a person, it realizes that, it starts this journey backwards to home. If it doesn't realize that on a very, very deep level, that permanent fulfillment, permanent happiness simply will not come about through anything which is time-bound, anything that's condition-bound, anything which is parts, anything which is based on, oh, I'm getting this, I'm experiencing that. If that realization is not concrete, then we'll never be able to sacrifice that realization and go back. So in order to go back, for the drop to re-merge with the ocean, it can't be a drop anymore. So that means for that to happen, that sacrifice going back, we cease to exist entirely. So even if on the surface it appears we have a life, we have objects, we have relationship, we have friends, we have possessions, we won't have anything. Because at that point we won't even have our own mind, we won't even have our own body. We'll be everything. So that's the Tyagi element of Datta. And the Bogi element of Datta is enjoyment. So as consciousness, Datta enjoys everything. Datta's enjoyment is not our normal enjoyment, which is like, okay, I go to work, I go and do my boring thing, and then I earn money or I earn time and then I can do my fun thing and enjoy. Datta's enjoyment is the very enjoyment of life itself, playing. It's not bound by conditions. Datta doesn't create little contracts where, okay, I do this, I create this, and then I can have my enjoyment, and I can have my fun. Datta, as consciousness, enjoys everything. The great masters have said, reality is Sat, Chit, Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. Bliss is enjoyment. Bliss is life, enjoy. If you look out at nature, that's not been interfered with by human beings, there's a natural kind of enjoyment in it, a spontaneity. Like if you see the birds here and stuff, there's a sense of playfulness, not just a rigid, bound, structured, reified existence. So that's that. And then Mahayogi, great yogi. What's a yogi? Yogi is someone who unifies everything that appears to be separate. The main thing which appears to be separate is I'm here and the world's out there. So here's a subject and there is a whole world out there that I'm perceiving. The real yogi, the real accomplished yogi, is the one who eradicates that idea of there being this and that, this and that, this and that. Everything is unified in that yogi's perception. And they do this through dissolving their mind. So that's that. So Tyagi, Bhogi, Mahayogi, Nityananda. So always blissful, eternally blissful. Niranjanaha, aspectless. That's mean Datta doesn't come in parts, he doesn't come in time, he doesn't come in sequences. He's always completely whole. He can't be separated. You can't cut him up, you can't divide him. And then Sarva Rupi. Sarva means like everything, all. Rupi means form, so all forms. So Datta arises as all forms. Sarva Datta, Sarva again everything. Datta in this context means giving. So Datta is that which gives life to everything. So Datta is that life element that makes everything breathe, that makes everything exist, which makes the wind blow, the sea move, our pulse beat. So Datta is the heart of reality. Then Sarvaga, all pervading, and Sarvaka Madha means all nourishing. So when you put all these definitions together, you see that you can't confine Datta whatsoever. It's like you put all these together and it's easier then to say, oh, this is what Datta is not than what he is. Because he is simply everything that exists. You look outside, you see Datta. You look inside, you see Datta. Even suffering is Datta. Even Datta arises as suffering. It's like, even Guruji says this, the fourth state, Turia, which sits behind the waking state, the dream state, and the sleep state, that's always there. So if we say, I want to achieve Turia, I want to enter Turia, there's nothing to create, there's nowhere to go. That's always there. So the Turia aspect of ourselves is, even when we're suffering, even when we're worrying, we're having tragedies, we're having joy, that's just watching, that's just enjoying, that's just laughing at everything. Huh? With Turia? Yeah. So the Turia state is like the screen. So when you watch a movie, it appears on a screen, right? So you can have forms appearing on the screen, action, romance, comedy, whatsoever, right? So that would be the waking state. The dream state would be the same thing, but maybe a bit more subtle, okay? And then the deep sleep state on that screen would be screen turned off, utter blackness. But that screen is not defined by the appearances that appear on it, right? So if there's a screen, there's drama appearing on it, action appearing on it, that doesn't change the screen, does it? It's appearing on it. So likewise, if we turn the movie off and there's utter blackness, the screen is again, the nature of that screen has not changed, right? So this is the state of Turia, this is the state of reality. So whatever appears to happen, whatever changes, whatever moves, that is always unmoving. That's always there. However, if that movie that's appearing on it doesn't have a single break, if there's no moment where we could just say, okay, I am the screen, then we'll never know that's there.
Recording in progress.
Because we'll be so consumed with the action, the drama that's being shown on that screen, that we'll never realize that there's a screen there as well. This is being projected. And deep sleep doesn't help us either, because deep sleep is just absolute blackness. Okay, so to create that, you don't need to create the screen. All that you need to do is to make the appearances on that screen gradually lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. So if the appearances that are on that screen are very, very dramatic, like a movie, very interesting, lots of drama, what's going to happen next? Oh, this is so important, that's so important, this is so meaningful. Then it'll go on, it'll go on, it'll go on, it'll go on. We'll never be able to take our eyes off it. It'll go on and then we'll collapse at the end, it'll go black, deep sleep. And then we wake up in the morning and it continues. But if we're able to get to a point where those images that appear on that screen kind of become very not so interesting for us, you know, like a movie, and it's just like, yeah, like if you're watching a movie, for instance, and it's really good, like it's interesting, meaningful, lots interesting stuff happening, you lose even awareness of yourself, right? You're totally like in there. That's the only thing exists. If movie becomes very boring, you start to become aware of yourself again, right? Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I want this. Oh, there's a screen there. Oh, the dog is over there. This. So only when that movie becomes boring and uninteresting, then, oh, you become aware of yourself again. So in order for us to become like aware of ourselves as Turia, as that screen, all of these activities of life have to become like, okay, fine, it's going on, but we're not really bothered, you know. Like even Adi Shankara says, he says there's 4 criteria for liberation. I forgot what the third one is, but 3 of them at least are one he calls mumukshutva, which is the desire for liberation, burning desire for liberation. The other one is vairagya. Vairagya is dispassion. Dispassion. So passion means I want something. There's something there for me. I do this, I'm going to be happy. I get this, I'm going to be happy. This is going to work for me. I'm going somewhere. And this is all passion. This drives samsara. This keeps it turning. The idea that there is something I can do, something I can achieve, something that I can get, which is going to bring permanent fulfillment around. Vairagya comes when you stop believing that. You see that in the world of getting things, time, change, connecting on a limited level, things will come, happiness for a day, a week, a month, but then it'll go. Vairagya comes when you kind of lose interest in all that thing. So only when that happens and life becomes less, it loses that nectar in a way, where you think, basically it's like there's a bliss of reality, but we shrink that bliss and say that bliss is there. Some people say that bliss is in money. Some people say that bliss is in this relationship. They say that bliss is in traveling to this place. So they shrink that bliss and say it's there, it's there, it's there. And at the same time they say it's not there. So immediately the bliss which belongs to reality is carved, is shattered into millions of pieces. So the only way you can get rid of that and become eternally blissful is to get rid of the idea that this is blissful and this is not blissful, this is good and this is not good. So that's yoga. It's scattering up those fragmented pieces into a whole. But if you come into that whole, you won't have all of these, you won't be able to have all of these dramas anymore. Because some people enjoy. Like, I've spoken to people like this before about these states, and then they've said, no, but that's how it's supposed to be. You have your kind of downs, but without the downs, you don't have your ups. That's what I say. That's the whole point, is that this is for people who get tired of going like that. Otherwise, enjoy. So for people who aren't tired of that, you can't say anything, because they're still interested in going like that. Anyway, I've segued. I don't know what I was talking about now. So, Adi Shankara, yeah. And the other one was discrimination. So viveka. So that comes into it when all of those things are in place. The viveka comes into place when you can see, if you have total faith that what masters say is true, that reality is sat, chit, ananda. So sat is obviously existence, something is there. Consciousness means there is an awareness that there is something there, and bliss is that natural enjoyment of that. If we have faith in that, we can then say in each moment, what is it that is obscuring this fact from me? That everything is all basically fine, that everything is already perfect. What is it? So that's when we start using viveka. And pretty quickly we'll learn that 99% of our thoughts is obscuring that. Because as soon as we have what we call a good thought or a positive thought, or this is good, it immediately sets us up for the opposite. You know, okay, this is good. Okay, now my life is really good. That's going to end though. Everything here ends. Everything here finishes. So that's how viveka functions, is that you discriminate between that which is permanent from that which is impermanent. So the path is letting go to attachment to anything that changes whatsoever. And specifically the idea that we can become permanently fulfilled by attachment and interaction with impermanent things. Because this is illogical, right? But deep down, a lot of us do actually believe this. That this, once I get this thing, fine, I'm sorted. But does any of our experiences testify to the truth of this? Mainly not. The yogis are the ones that see that and say, yeah, that's how it is. Okay, I'm finished. That's why if you read like stories about a lot of these yogis, you find before they meet their master or before they get liberated or before they have this breakthrough, most of them were suicidal, because they see so clearly the faults of samsaric existence, like the fact that it's a nightmare basically. Like, so it's like, I think people have these moments of relief on the spiritual path maybe when they have these glimpses. But to see, if you don't think this is if you think this is great, then it's going to carry on. And you'll have the moments of greatness, but then you'll also have the moments of when it all tumbles down. But as long as that engine is going, when you think there is this greatness, there is this bliss, there is this happiness that we can have through wandering around doing this, doing that, then it'll go on. And even masters, they won't interfere, they'll say enjoy. Because they know that that's just consciousness enjoying that in a different form. So there's nothing to do about it. So anyway, for me that's Datta. You know, Datta is like the soul of existence. It's not a deity. We connect to him in a certain way, in a certain form, but that's not for him, that's for us. Datta doesn't need statues, Datta doesn't need temple. He's already everything, he's already everywhere. That's for us because, okay, if someone says to us, look, yeah, like this, if someone says, look, Datta is Tyagi Yogi, you know, Niranjanaha, enjoy, connect to him. How many of us can connect to him? Because to do that, we already have to nullify ourselves, right? So that's why Datta comes as avatars. Sai Baba, we can catch Sai Baba. There's stories about him. We can say, oh, this is Baba, this is the way he looks, this is what he said, this is what his arti sounds like, this is how I worship him, this is how I dress him. Because our minds are still active, we have to kind of have a middle ground between complete dissolution and our normal activity. So that's why Datta comes in bodies as avatars, and he comes out and he speaks. Otherwise, none of us would be able to connect to him. So for me, that's Datta. That's everything that exists. So that's in like Datta tradition. He's like the ultimate. He's like the absolute. So if you connect to like Shirdi Sai Baba, eventually that connection should terminate in Datta. In like the supreme Father in complete dissolution. And then when you get there, you'll say, okay, Shirdi Baba, beautiful, Mohanji, beautiful, Shripad Sri Vallabha, beautiful, but you'll know where they came from. And then you won't be able to discriminate and say, oh, this master, that master, one master is better than the other, because you'll know that through time, these, like Mohanji said the other day about relevance. Someone asked him who he is, he says, relevance. So that's what an avatar is. You take supreme consciousness, you manifest it, and it has to be relevant to that time, otherwise it's useless. So maybe if we took Shirdi Sai Baba the way he actually was, and we put him in the West, in Scotland, in America, in Serbia, we sent him wandering around on airplanes, maybe he wouldn't be relevant, maybe people wouldn't connect to him. I mean, Baba was beating people, he was throwing stuff at people. If Mohanji was doing that, would people still connect with him? So Bhagavan Nityananda as well, he was also doing this, yelling at people, beating people. There's that story from Sri M's book where Sri M came and met him as a child, and Bhagavan Nityananda just slapped him like that. And he came with his uncle, and his uncle said, yeah, this is a blessing, this is a great blessing. And that's quite a popular story. But anyway, that story ended with Sri M. Later he was with his guru in Himalayas, and he was doing Kriya practice in like Babaji's tradition. And he cleared one of his sides, either Ida or Pingala, one of his main pranic channels, and he said, oh, what do I do about the other? And the guru said, no, Nityananda sorted that out already with that slap. Don't worry about it. So if we took a Shirdi Baba, we took a Nityananda, we took even any other avatutas that are even more crazy appearing, and we put them in Western world, and would they be relevant? Would it work? Probably not. So all these avatars have to have relevance. So that's another aspect of Datta, is continuous manifestation through avatars and amshas. So beings that manifest Datta, that talk about Datta, that express Datta in a way that's relevant to the time that they're living in. And this is constant. See, at least I think until the next years that pass, until the end of this era, Datta will keep again coming. The one that comes in 100 years won't look the same as the one that's here now. It won't look the same as Shirdi Baba. It'll be completely different. So that's that element of Datta. So that also ties in with Datta tradition. So what's tradition in spiritual sense? So tradition plus Datta, it means the thing in the world that keeps that realization of how I described Datta then, aspectless, all-pervading, totally blissful. It keeps that moving in the world. So the tradition begins as soon as Datta manifests basically through guru, usually, or avatar. And that being's body becomes the start of the tradition, basically. So even a photo, look how much is done just through putting a photo of like Shirdi Baba or someone in your house. That's the start of the tradition. And then come the words that being speaks, artis about that being, stories about their life. This is all tradition. This all exists as like a bridge so that we can eventually connect to the very like top of that river, which has not got any of those things. That's the power element. That's why we say in Datta tradition we've got all of these avatars, all of these great masters, but Datta's the power source. You can't see him, but he's the one who's empowering everything. He's energizing everything. And that's where it's all going. But you connect where you want to connect. And that's the relevance of Mohanji, especially in this time, is that he's created so many different ways to connect. I mean, look at what practices did, Shirdi Baba leave behind. He just said a different thing to every person. I mean, we say, okay, his teaching is, patience and faith. But if you went to him and asked, "Oh, Baba, what is your teaching?" you don't know what he would say to you. Like, you don't know. He wouldn't lay it out like that, maybe in a succinct way. But now in this generation, Mohanji's created countless ways that everybody can connect, just in whatever way they can. But because he has made it, it's got Datta in it. So even if it's a very simple thing, I do a bit of service, I do a bit of dancing or whatever, because he's behind it, it means somehow that can take us to Datta, by and by, bit by bit. So that's really the magnificence of it. And I think this will be seen more in the future than it is now. All of these beings, they're not recognized in their time. Even though like now we think, oh no, we recognize this great master. I think in 100 years it'll seem pretty paltry. I mean, how many people did Shirdi Baba have around him when he was alive compared to now? Not even 1%, not even 0.1%. So really, physical lifetime of these Datta avatars is just like first act of a very long play, I think. So yeah, that's so tradition, Datta tradition, is that which anchors Datta knowledge of Supreme Consciousness in the world through tangible things. So first tangible thing is the body of a guru, then the words of a guru, center of a guru, guru's mandala of disciples. This is all tradition. And the next important element about tradition is that if that element of absolute reality becomes diluted, then the tradition becomes weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. Like we can see this in some of these religious traditions, or so-called spiritual traditions, that the actual element of a being sitting there knowing I am reality and having all the powers of that reality as well, all the bliss, all the knowledge, it's not there anymore. They have a book, they have words, they have practices, but there's no longer a being sitting there saying, I am reality. I mean, they won't say like this. They'll probably just pretend to be a normal person, but they'll operate as that. So the problem is that when tradition loses that, gradually, it becomes diluted. And people who haven't reached, then they'll say, okay, then it becomes, all the words become parroted. It's like we're saying about Datta tradition with the relevance. See, that an avatar who comes 100 years after another one may appear to speak completely differently, but that'll be because of the relevance. But when that's not there, these people will just repeat the words of someone that was here 100 years, 200. Maybe it's not relevant anymore to speak that way, to do that kind of practice. So then it becomes useless. And then all that's left is words, but there's no nectar left in those words. There's no power left in those words. So tradition, for it to carry on, it has to go from master to master to master to master to master. That's when the guru has really done their job. And this is what Mohanji says, making masters. It's they either create masters that are on the same level as themselves or even higher. Then tradition continues and absolute reality stays anchored in the world. It can go on. Otherwise, it's like a bit of a slow descent, maybe. And eventually you end up just with these forms which don't resemble anything like the original, truth or anything like that. I mean, I always thought this when I was a kid, actually, when Jehovah's Witnesses, we had quite a lot in the UK, would come to the door. I'd always think, because they kind of appear like salesmen, like in this way, but I was always thinking that, like, if you really had something in this sphere, spiritual sphere, existential sphere, then just by looking at you, the way you communicate, the way you express myself, I should be able to think, yeah, you've got something. What is it? Because this is how masters are, right? They can just sit there. People will show up. They sit there saying nothing. People will just show up and sit with them. It always happens like this. And yet they're not selling anything. So trying to sell something is the first real sign that what you have has got not much value, I think. Because I think it should be automatic. But I just wanted to, I wanted to just talk a bit about an example of how that functions in Datta tradition, of how that's passed on and how these masters sometimes train others up, and that's with Shirdi Baba and his disciple Upasani Maharaj. So obviously we have Baba in the temple here, and we got Maharaj's picture there as well. So this is just an amazing story of how Datta tradition works and how masters work. So Upasani Maharaj was a kind of, always a bit of a strange person, always kind of inclined spiritually from a young age. He'd do like ascetic practices, he'd run off, he'd starve himself, but kind of wayward, and he'd have different experiences. And he, at some point he realized, look, I need a proper guru, perfect master to come to completion. And people had kind of pointed him towards Shirdi Baba before, but he'd always resisted because Baba was seen as a Muslim, and Upasani Maharaj was like a orthodox Brahmin Hindu, so he resisted it. But eventually he wound up there, and even when he wound up with Baba, he tried to escape. So because he had, I think he was married even 3 times or something, and he had this, one wife died and this and that. And even then he tried to escape, and Baba said, okay, you go, I'll give you 7 days leave, see what you can do, see how far you get. So he did it, he left, and it was something like, I'm not sure the exact, within 7 days he'd managed to get just a few miles from Shirdi. So in one place he gets held up doing one thing, in another place the transport takes him the wrong direction. So he ends up back at Baba completely exhausted. He says, look, I've been away from you this long, I've only managed to get to, and he says, of course, I've been behind you all this time, Baba says. And he says, now, stop messing about, go and sit in this temple and just do nothing, just keep yourself out of trouble. And to preface that, Baba had already told him that they had Runanu Banda together. So Runa means debt, Banda means like lock or tie. So that means they're connected. Baba basically said, look, we've got a contract together, it has to be fulfilled, you've got no choice in this matter. In their case, this contract was for Baba to make Upasani Maharaj into himself, basically, to transform him, to carve him from what he was into himself, basically. That was the debt in this case. And this Upasani Maharaj, he was such a strange character by most standards. But Baba said about him, he said his merit is so high that if you took a scale, you could put the whole world on one side of the scale and just this guy on the other one, and he'd outweigh the entire, his merit is that high. This is what Baba said about him. And this Baba had people around him for years and years and years, and this guy just showed up. And he showed up even a bit unwillingly, because Baba pulled him towards him and said, look, this is what has to happen. And so then he basically sat in this temple for 4 years. I mean, when he said didn't do anything, he meant don't create anything more. Don't get yourself in any trouble. Don't construct anything. Don't start, don't initiate anything. Just sit there, be empty, be available, be open. That's what he told him to do, basically. So being there, he had many different challenges, experiences. Baba told him also to read scriptures, which is kind of interesting. Because we always think of Baba as like very spontaneous Avadhuta type being. But he told this guy, read this, and this, which is kind of strange. But that was because Baba was setting him up, because he knew that people were going to come to him. And some of these Avadhutas, great beings, established in supreme consciousness, they're there, they radiate like living Shiva lingas. I mean, there's plenty like this in India, but they can't tell you how to get there. They're just there. They'll maybe shout at you, throw something at you, give you a slap, and you'll benefit from that. But they can't give you a path to get into that same state. They can't help you get there. But beings like Baba, beings like Mohanji, they can. Whoever comes to them, they'll give them the exact word that they need to take the next step. Old person, young person, animal, deceased person, anybody. They can help, they can instruct like this. So Baba was setting him up for that role, because he knew that people are going to come. I'm making him into myself. People are going to come to him. He's got to know, he's got to be able to communicate. Not like just, okay, reading books can replace that, you know. A good example of this is actually, you know, Osho, for instance, this master. He had read something like, he was a professor before, he read the whole library of Pune University. And later on, something like he had a library at his ashram or whatever it was, full books, full like this. And he said, I read all these books. And people couldn't believe it, but people would go and they'd pick all the books out and they'd say, okay, there's like copious notes in all of these books. It's like, how have you had the time to do this? But through doing that, even though his realization of silence and emptiness, he probably didn't get it from all these books he read, because he programmed his instrument with all of this knowledge, he could communicate like anything. He could just sit and talk hour after hour after hour after hour after hour, originally. And it worked and it made sense. Whereas some of these beings, like Avadhuta type beings, the experience of reality is so overwhelming to them that they can't say anything about it. They just become like a madman or a child. It can't be integrated. So these beings can help, but they're not a master in the same way that Shirdi Baba was, Mohanji is, Narasimha, Saraswati, all of these great avatars. So Baba wanted him to be like that, Upasani Maharaj. And so that's how we started training him, just through situations. And gradually, by, just naturally, Upasani Maharaj's experience began to open up. And he started to experience himself as everything, as reality. And as this happened, people just started coming to him. And Baba told people, after you go and see me, go and see him. So he was already kind of passing the flame over to him in that way. And people started worshipping him. He was kicking them away, saying, what do you worship me for? But they kept coming back. And he was completely naked. He was just wearing like a rag around him as well. But people would keep coming back, trying to worship him, trying to serve him. And eventually he just gave up. And he said, okay, fine. And so that's how it went. And it went like that by and by. And he was dotted around different places. He'd moved to different places. And he'd moved to a place, he would just sit somewhere all day. People would gather around him. Because when someone comes into that state, they become attractive, they start shining. And it doesn't matter what they say, what they do, what they look like, what they talk about. People are pulled to them. So this is how it was with him. He was a great master. And I like this part about him when people came to worship him and he was resisting the worship. I think this is really the sign of a great master, is that they're not interested in being worshipped. They're not even interested in teaching. They're not interested about gathering followers, saying anything, message for the world, anything like this. Because as long as that's there, then whatever you say to people, there's going to be something of yourself into it. Oh, I've got something. Even the slightest feeling of, I want to teach something is already an impurity. It already disqualifies you from actually doing that. So usually with these people, they get forced into that kind of role more often than not, and eventually they just acquiesce and go along with it. So so that passed, and then kind of Baba eventually left his body. Upasani Baba moved to Sakori. Baba left his body and he carried on Baba's work, and he was just the same. I mean, if I spoke to a few people about it, but if anyone's been to that place near Shirdi, Sakori, it's as powerful, if not more powerful, as Baba's Samadhi. It's incredible. So that's an example of how that tradition is passed. It's not just that, okay, I initiate you into this, I give you this ritual, I give you that book. Baba transformed that being into himself completely. And then when Baba's form finished, this form then could carry on, do the same thing. So that's the proper way that the tradition goes on. And masters will do that with everybody. I mean, masters polish everybody, they carve everybody, but it just depends. If you want to make a marble statue, you can't make it from wood. You have to have that. So, for whatever reason, Baba saw in this very strange character that this is marble somehow. Even the whole world didn't see it. Only Baba saw it. This is marble, and he carved him into that. So this is what masters do. Even if you give masters a very lousy material, they'll still make it look. It'll look beautiful and it'll work, and people will be able to come and worship it in their own way because these masters are the supreme carvers. So I think that's it. So for me, I've said what Datta is. Datta is the absolute reality. Datta tradition is how that reality is continually manifested and passed on and known and communicated and transmitted in the world, and it goes on like that. There's no sign of it stopping. So it's here to stay, and with Datta tradition, we're really, really lucky to be connected to it because it's still a tradition that's completely alive. Because look, Master is there, Mohanji is there sitting. That means tradition is alive. So it's okay to be connected with a master that's deceased. You can benefit tremendously from it, but there's nothing like a living master, because a living master can really torture you and scold you. Because maybe you've got awakening, maybe you've had some experience, maybe you've got some knowledge and stuff like that, but if there's just a slight bit of dirt remaining, that master will put you in the position where that dirt comes right to the surface and you see it magnified by 1,000%. And when it's that magnified, then you can address it. Otherwise, I think honestly, without the living master, we can always find a way of hiding from ourselves. So that's the grace. And even I say about Osho again. Actually, at the end of his life, he said to people, "After I die, go and find a living master." He didn't say keep worshipping me on the wall. He said go and find a living master, otherwise you haven't got a chance, basically. So really, to conclude, Datta tradition, it's just the living master, basically, the living master which comes after living master, and it goes on like that. Because without that, what's reality for us? Tyagi, Bhogi, Mahayogi, it's just meaningless, right? There's a master there sitting who we can talk to. I mean, these words are just words to us. So that's it. I'm finished. Thanks. Okay. Oh yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Am I still live? Yeah. Yeah, so he asked, when I'm doing Datta Arti here at MCB, how do I connect? When I try and do any of these artis here, I don't think about anything, I don't do anything, I just try and be completely empty and let the words, whatever I do, I just let it come, and I just be like that. And I just try and keep my eyes focused directly on the deity and just try and be completely present, completely open. I think that's for me. I think that's worship. The greatest worship is 100% attention. Like if you can be 100% with that being, with that deity, with that practice, what else is needed? Because then that being will absorb you into itself. Then you'll look at that and you'll forget about yourself. I think this is how. Okay, that's my thoughts on it anyway. Anything else I can say? My experiences. With specifically about what? This data. Yeah, my experiences with this, the data here is, I don't experience the same power every time I do the arti, but sometimes the power when the arti happens just completely goes through the roof. I think some people here have experienced that when arti is happening. Not every day it goes through the roof, but sometimes there are times when I have like goosebumps the whole time I'm performing. And for me that signifies the presence of other beings which come, higher beings, lower beings, animals, whatever. And Mohanji said this as well. I spoke to him about it and says, for Datta, Arti, many beings come when that's happening. And someone who was here now, he just left in the audience, said when he was in the Datta Arti, he had a vision of someone else there doing the Arti with like a earthenware pot and camphor in it. I told this to Mohanji, he said, yeah, that was probably me. So, oh yeah, there he is. Yeah, you said. Yeah, so I think that's the magic. So yeah, sometimes with this Datta Arti we really get treated. I think there's many different beings which come. Datta's a great, already he attracts all of these birds, rabbits, frogs. They all come to him. So it's all there. Yeah.
We have chickens around our Köchtenhaus.
Chickens?
Yeah.
Ah.
Do you know about this?
Chicken?
Could
no.
it be?
It could be. Datta's there as well?
Yeah. And in Scandinavia they say that chickens pick up the karmas of people.
Oh, possible.
Maybe it's this.
Yeah, possible. Yeah, but honestly, I think even these places that we have around here where Mohanji's not there himself, but Mohanji's people are, these will also become special places because people are going there after a day of retreat and they're going with that energy, so, yeah. Okay. Yeah, say, Mike.
Thanks, Jack. You talk about the boredom. We get bored, but the trigger for boredom is also Datta. What causes that trigger? Datta.
The trigger for boredom is Datta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to call it absolutely boredom though. I mean, normal boredom. I think normal boredom, there's still a seed of an idea that there's something better here. It's like this kind of, you know, fear of missing out type of thing. I'm bored, but I'm kind of, it's more, this is more than boredom. It's like, you just see so clearly that there's nothing that you can do really. It's like, it's a very depressing state because you see that whatever I create, whatever I do, it's all going to end. It's all going to end up in the same place. No matter what I do, what I don't do, it's all going to end up. So you say what nothing matters. I think even in, like, if you read Mohanji's story, this was also there with him after he's spoken about this after Amu's accident. It was such a tragic experience that so clearly demonstrated that anything can end at any moment. So, I don't know, I think if that really sinks in and you feel that in every cell of your body, that no matter what I do, what I get, how perfectly I manage to move this furniture of my life around, so it's good in the way I imagine with it, it can end in 2 seconds. So for me, that's the boredom. It doesn't mean that you can't enjoy life anymore. It's just that you just don't believe in attaining permanent fulfillment through changing things, or indestructible fulfillment through destructible things. And yeah, that comes from Datta as well. That is you, as Datta, slowly returning back to that, because that's all it is. If you come into that state, if you come into Turia state, you'll see that actually there is no individual identity. There's thoughts, there's a continuity of thoughts, and because the thoughts are so ceaseless and interrupted, it gives the illusion that there's a little person in there. But if that continuity is broken, you'll see there is only thoughts, and each are completely different. So we might as well have, our thoughts might as well each be by a different person. There's no consistent, solid entity there whatsoever. Thoughts just arise as patterns. So, yeah, what can I say? Anything more? You look thoughtful after that.
Just recall Sati Sai Baba, when he was talking about the reason for creation, he said, I separated myself from myself in order to love myself.
Yeah.
That was the purpose, to love myself.
If God would speak, that's what he would say.
Exactly.
Is the meaning for life. It's the same thing. It's like what we said at the beginning about the sacrifice, the Tyagi element. Because Sati Sai Baba was Datta avatar as well. You know. So the sacrifice was, I sacrificed the knowledge of myself as absolute in order to have the experience of gradually going through that experience again of being lost and then being found. I mean, it's all a game. There's nothing serious whatsoever. There's nothing serious, there's nothing ultimately meaningful whatsoever happening here at all. There's nothing, this is just a game, this is just a play. Only our thoughts tell us otherwise. There's actually, if people knew how secure they actually are, that there's no danger whatsoever, then it'd be amazing. The danger is only in thoughts. If you think reality is one way, reality will appear that way for you. If you don't think reality is any way, then you'll see quite quickly what reality is and what it is not. So that's all the masters say, that the world is only the mind. That is, the world always comes through the filter of the mind. Like all appearances are sprayed like with our impressions, with our traumas, with our memories, with our insecurities. It's there in every single moment. We can't perceive anything without that. I mean, to perceive without that, it's like you'd have open eyes, and you just actually have you seen this? Have you seen the way that babies actually look at the world with these like eyes of wonder? And also they don't blink that much. If you ever looked at, they don't blink the same way that people do. Blinking comes from fear, basically, mainly. Also, go back to, if you look at Osho, that guy also didn't blink. It's like the eyes of a baby, you know, just constant wonderment. That blinking signifies, this is one thing, that's another thing, that's another thing. This I want, this I don't want. That's like the physical manifestation of that, breaking things up. Yeah, like the camera shutter. But if all is open, all is all pervasive, then it's like, because actually, you know, the senses themselves don't perceive separation. The mind does, but the senses don't at all. Like if you silence the mind and look at the world, there's nothing that separates anything whatsoever. Nothing. You can't even name anything. I mean, is a tree, or is that just a word? If you take away the word tree and you take away the word ground, without those words, can you separate these things? How would you do it otherwise? Without a concept, without an idea. Erase all of that, and then you've got reality. Yeah. Unseparated, aspectless. Tyagi Bhogi Mahayogi. Yeah. That's my opinion anyway. Okay. Anything more?
What do you mean by surrendering the senses?
Surrendering the senses. No, the senses don't need to be surrendered. It's interpretation that needs to be surrendered through the senses. For example, it's what I just. Well, the practice of it, I would say, is like this. Actually, it's in not so much in like Hindu tradition, but in one tradition that I'm really connected to, which is called Dzogchen in Buddhism. They only practice with open eyes. There's no such thing as meditating like this. They practice with open eyes. And some of them, when they're really training, some of these strict ones, they'd put some kind of kumkum or something on the eyelashes, and if they blinked, they get a whack on the back. Because they're supposed to come into that state where there's no blinking whatsoever. But the point of that is, can you see the world without seeing the world at all? Can you see the world without seeing the world at all? So can you sit looking out there? Okay, there are trees there, there's a building there, there's a sky there, but yet be completely empty inside yourself, to such an extent that you even forget that's this. That's the state that you have to come into. It's not just enough to, okay, this is the empty aspect of myself. You have to see that all of this, all what we call appearance, all what we call creation, is also just emptiness, is a dance of emptiness. If you take away the names, the concepts, and then the way we build those concepts into experiences, memories, traumas, then nothing is anything. Yeah.
I come to the frequency of Krishna,
Yeah.
there is a separation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
And you feel separated. You want to be one, and the yearning
Yeah,
keeps
yeah.
going on and on because there is a separation.
Yeah.
Because I'm not operating on his
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. No, the longing is necessary. You have to have the longing. That's another part of what Michael was saying about the boredom. The longing is that's what's pulling you back. That longing for something to be there. Because in order for that, okay, me and Krishna are the same or whatever, the me has to go. Then only Krishna exists.
Yes.
You have to say, what is this me? What is me? What is I? This is like, I mean, people talk about Ramana Maharishi and his practice of self-inquiry and stuff like this. This is like advanced practice when your mind is very subtle already. You look inside and you say, okay, I am. What is this I? Who am I? Where am I? This feeling of I, if you can leave that without saying, I am this, even I am a woman, I am a man, I do this, I that, just this basic feeling of I exist. Before thought, that's the real you actually. As soon as you say I am, anything after that is an illusion. As soon as you say I am, any word after that, illusion begins, basically. So reality just says, it looks and it says I. And that's it. Or masters like that as well. And there's nothing. They don't say I am this and that's out there. It's just I, and then it's a full stop. And no thought comes then. And then they live. So this, anything which comes after I am, is the beginning of illusion. It's an idea only, basically. And that's why, like Ramana, he'd already he would always start people at that point. People would come to him with a problem, and he'd say, "Who's asking?" Like, he would try and give them the highest teaching right from the start. If they didn't get it, he would go down until they could get something. But in order to remove that separation, yeah, you have to let yourself go completely. Like you have to get to the point where, like in meditation practice, you can sit, you can say, I am aware, there is awareness, and leave it there forever. That means no thought happens anymore. When thought ceases to happen, you cease to exist. You're finished. Life is finished then. When thought ceases to happen, then you cease to exist. Because you, as you know yourself, is just something which is maintained by the continuity of thinking. So if I say I am a man called Jack, for instance, I say that, I accept that as the truth, then that experience begins of that being. And then he has this, he has that, then obviously that person has his body, he has his possessions, he has this, and this. And the whole thing grows like that. This world, as we perceive it, is just that. It's the growth out from I am into I am a body, into the body with its various relationships and connections. That's the world. So the path is, because you can't go straight to that point. So the path is to make all of those connections, so me, mine, my this, my that, my opinion, my belief, my fear, that desire, just to make all of those things lighter first. The lighter those things get, the less heavy life begins to seem, the more subtle your mind will become. When it gets very subtle, then you can go to that place of I am and state. Then the mind will just crack down the middle. Like Mohanji says, and he says in the fourth state, samadhi, the mind, the fabric of the mind just breaks and you can't go back. But that's why he says you have to be aware all the time. That awareness has to be injected into everything. So to do that, you just have to keep coming back to this feeling of being aware, and then leave it there and know that that's the truth. It's hard to get ahead because we think we have to think about it. We think that if we come into that state, then somehow it'll be an object of our mind. We'll be able to say something about it. We'll be able to claim something. It's not an experience. You have to have thoughts to have an experience. Experience is thinking. So again, like if I was to do it in like a sitting meditation, I would just say, okay, I'm here, I'm awake. What is it that's awake? There's an awareness here, right? So thinking goes on. What's aware of the thinking which goes on? It's not, thinking is, what's aware of thought? What would you say is in you, what's aware of your thinking? So thinking's happening, it's appearing. Like now, okay, you're listening to me, you say, I'm aware of Jack speaking. So when your thinking is happening, who is the one that's aware of that thinking? Yeah, but does that thing have a shape? The awareness? Does it have a form? Does it have a name? That's you. Yeah. So that's the highest teaching. What is that part of you which is aware of thought? Look at it and see, what is it? It's just openness. It's just space. It's just awareness. That's actually you. That's the space of existence. But because the identification with thought is so consistent from moment to moment to moment, like the blue sky is obscured by cloud, that's obscured. That awareness, that is actually reality, that's consciousness, that's you. So what we call awakening, what Mohanji calls self-realization. So normal state is, imagine sky full of dark, black clouds. So for us, the sky is only clouds. That's thinking. That's normal life. Awakening is when that's pierced through and you realize, oh, I'm the sky. Clouds are appearing, but I am the canvas on which it's appearing. So that's and then when you become stable in that, you know, okay, I'm the sky. And okay, clouds come, they come, yeah, but they're not me. They don't touch me, they don't affect me. And then the more you strengthen in that position of being the sky, that light burns all those clouds out. And those clouds become subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler and subtler. And then life just, it's not heavy anymore. Then even yourself, your feeling of being a person, it all becomes more and more weightless. When all the clouds are burned out and there's no possibility for any cloud occurring, that's completion. That's siddhahood, avadhutahood. But the first way is, that's why I say about just making the mind subtler, is that you can't pierce those clouds when it's very, very heavy and black. That's why in all these traditions they give, I mean, it sounds boring to most people who like advanced practices and stuff, but just being a good person, being non-violent, being trustworthy, being honest, because that at least makes you can sleep at night. If you're completely in a mess, if you're deceiving other people, if you're deceiving yourself, you'll never have that space in your mind to sink, to go through your mind, basically. You'll just be in drama all the time. And that's why Mohanji says also about self-acceptance. He says if your energy is still going on being somebody different, on kind of insecurities, and you won't have the energy to go to the real self, because you'll be consumed in every moment. But if you see someone who completely accepts themselves, there's a relaxation there. There's energy is already freed up. That's why you say such people, oh, they have charisma, they have an energy. But that energy is spare. They're not using it to be somebody who they're not. They're not using it to, oh, I'm with this person now, let me appear like this. Let me try and subtly communicate this about myself. They're just there, they're just present. So if you want to meditate on something, use that, what I just said. Thinking is happening, who is aware of the thoughts? What is its shape? What is its form? Where is it? Who is it? It's that that's what I was saying about that Turia state. It's there all the time, but we don't look at it. Yeah. Yeah, it's very subtle. Yeah. And it's like building a muscle. It's very weak at the start. We see it, oh yeah, great. But then, oh no, this thinking is more important, this story is more important, this drama is more important. When that becomes weak through the dispassion that I was talking about it earlier, dispassion, when all that stuff becomes less interesting, that naturally starts to come to the fore. When those clouds become more subtle, you just see, okay, that's there. And then you see it's there all the time. That was the one watching. That's been there watching my entire life. And it's never been harmed, it's never been afraid, it's never been sad, it's never been traumatized. That's just been watching everything. It's been confusing its identity with everything, but it's always pure, it's always untouched, it's always perfect. But it's everybody's choice. I mean, it's everybody's choice in each moment. Either they're genuinely exhausted with all that flow of normal thinking, activity, feeling, emoting, or they're not. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, certain things, certain desire patterns, they're just, you can't just say, okay, finished, I'll get rid of it. You have to go through it. You have to go through these things, and you see, and you have to go through them knowingly, saying, suffering is going to come sooner or later. Let me go through. Let me see it. Let me experience it. And then see. But with that awareness. Yeah. But that's the one, that brief point that you saw then, that awareness that has no shape, has no form, has no anything. That's the awareness that masters are established in. But there's no point where that ends and, oh, just the normal story comes back. It's just like then that forever. And that expands. For most people, that would be very boring. Like nothingness forever, I cease to exist. Most masters, most of the masters that come into that, they don't keep the body, they just leave there and then. So even to come into that, you'd have to actually be ready to say, if I'm going into that state, I'm prepared to, if the body has to be dropped, it's dropped. Because for most, it actually is like that for most beings. Masters that talk are usually prepared for it, and it happens. But otherwise, so I don't know if it's for everybody. Who's ready for this world to become nothing? Sacrifice. Yeah. But that goal is not an idea. It's not something you imagine. Because for yogis, they don't even need to talk. They just go straight. They just go straight there. They don't even mess about. Yogis don't have this idea. Oh, I want to be liberated. They just sit down and they be quiet. Like Guruji was saying yesterday about those beings in Kailash. They just sit waiting, not doing anything, not saying anything. Just sit waiting, not saying anything, not doing anything. So this is how yogis are as well. It's like liberation for them is not an idea. Because how can you want something if you don't know what it is? So many people fool themselves with this game, and they go to India, they say, I want enlightenment, I want liberation. And then there's thousands of people there that say, yeah, I'm selling it. Come to this course, pay this money, do this practice, give me this, give me that, and I'll give you this. Because these people actually don't know what it is, what this thing means, they go and they buy it. And they go on whatever head trip they want. So I'd say, liberation, don't say I want liberation. See patterns in yourself that you want to be liberated from, and start there and liberate yourself from that. And then bit by bit by bit by bit, you'll get bit by bit liberated. And then even by doing that, you become extremely blissful, extremely comfortable, extremely easy, extremely free in self-expression. You can talk, you'd have transmission power, and all of this. And then at that point, then you don't even get a choice of like, do I want to liberate myself even from the subtlest sense of self-existence? Subtlest sense of, okay, me here, them out there. Then it's your but it's your choice on everything. What do you want to liberate yourself from? But for me, I don't buy the idea of just outwardly saying, I want to be liberated. Because if we do that, and then for the next 2 hours we're chasing our thoughts and our dramas, and we're living in a contradiction. Each time we accept our thought, our way of perceiving the world as a separated space, each time we accept that as true, we say, I don't want to be liberated. That's a strict way of saying it, but that's how it is. You have to get in such a state where you don't perceive that your thoughts represent anything that's real whatsoever. So in Buddhism they teach like this, that the practice is like in Dzogchen, it's what I said now, being in awareness. And then they say during the day, train to see everything as just as a magical illusion, as not real at all. Because otherwise you can't be fearless, right? As long as there's me and you, there's a chance for some kind of little fear there, as long as there's a separation. So, that's how it is, but be it. Okay. Okay. What time is it? 11:45? 11. Okay. Okay. Do you want to just meditate for a few minutes, and then finish, just for 5 minutes? Huh? You will. Huh? Yeah.